Excel accounting practice problem, inventory, and inventory subsidiary ledger. Get ready, because we're about to excel. Here we are in our Excel worksheet. In prior presentations, we put together this worksheet from a blank sheet, which is good practice if you would like to take a look at that. Now we're going to be using this worksheet in order to enter transactions, starting with our beginning balance transactions. 2 tabs on down below, example and practice. Example tab in essence being an answer key. Let's take a look at it now. We're going to be entering the beginning balance for our inventory. So if we look at the inventory, we're thinking about this accounts as being our beginning balances. We're going to start off with the accounts that are a bit more difficult in that they have some kind of subsidiary information we need to add to it. So for example, the inventory, probably the most difficult. If we're tracking inventory in the system, we cannot just put the dollar amount representing the inventory that we have, but also need to support that with inventory units. So this is important when you're building this in Excel, and you can imagine if we're trying to mirror what would happen in a database program, what the database program like a QuickBooks program might do or other accounting software with regards to this transaction. What they would like to be able to say is, hey, look, you cannot just put the beginning balance in a dollar amount. If you want me to track the items as well, you have to give me the inventory items as well so we can do that supporting calculation. And you can imagine how or what kind of components can and cannot be automated in that type of system. So for example, if I go back on over to the QuickBooks here or back to the Excel worksheet, we're going to enter our journal entry to get that beginning balance in the system. Then we're also going to go all the way to the right over here and enter our subsidiary ledger. We're going to imagine that we're getting this from this information. This is our beginning information with regards to the inventory items. We're imagining our guitars, but we're just going to list them here as items on the left. And then you can imagine if you enter this into like a QuickBooks or something like that, you would have to enter the information for the sales description, the purchase description, and so on, because you're going to use this in order to populate bills, invoices, sales receipts. But what we really want is the cost here, because that's going to help us support the amount of the beginning balance we're putting on the books. And then we'd have the sales price. We're not going to deal with that right now because we're just really supporting what's on the balance sheet, which is the cost and the number of units that is on hand. So if I was to multiply the number of units times the cost, that would add up to that 2,896. So we're going to get an idea of that concepts as we put it into our system. As we do so, you might want to then be considering, what kind of components might a software system be automating and what kind of thing can it not really automate as easily. And so I'm going to go back on over to the left. And so I'm going to go into our practice problem now. So to just enter the transaction here, it would be an easy transaction to enter. We would just simply say, okay, I'm going to basically debit. Let's make this item a little bit skinnier for the date. I'm going to say we're going to debit the inventory, increasing the inventory. So I'm going to say equals the inventory. The other side, then I'm going to take to equity. Now notice I'm putting this on the books as of January 1st, because really I'm saying that this information was from the prior period, and I'm putting it on the books as of the beginning of the period. I'm not going to have anything that's going to be going to then the income statement, but rather I'm just going to be putting everything on balance sheet accounts. You might say, hey, look, why don't you just do the entire transaction here with the debits and credits as it is shown on the trial balance, and you just need one journal entry to do that. And that's true. We do just need one journal entry, and within Excel, it might be easier to do it that way. But note that if you were trying to do this in a software like a QuickBooks or something like that, the software will often be designed to try to manage one account at a time. And that actually can be useful because that allows us to construct the subsidiary ledgers as we do it. So what we're going to do then is enter each transaction at a time, focusing in on one account. And the other side, we're just going to be putting to equity. And that's how a lot of software will be set up as well. And that means that if I get all my balance sheet accounts in correctly, the rest will kind of wash out to equity. Equity will be the difference, which in our case will be the 77,896. Now we have something here that clearly shows a balance sheet kind of activity and what equity is. You might have a situation where you don't know what equity is, but you got this much in the checking account and so on and so forth. And you would have to have equity as basically being your plug, in that case being what you need to do in order to reconcile. So we're going to do this instead of one journal entry. as a piecemeal journal entry, posting the other side to each account to the equity account as you might see it in software. And so I'm going to then minimize this. So we're going to say the inventory needs to go on the books for the 2896. That's going to be the debit. I'm going to represent the credits with a negative. So I'm going to say negative of that number. And so it's also in the credit column and negative for that double verification. We can indent this if we want by going to the Home tab, Alignment, and Indent, giving that added indent. If I post this here, we can see the activity straight on the trial balance. So we're going to post it twice so we can see the activity in both areas. The beginning balances are obviously 0 because we're entering the beginning balances in place. Going to put this in H6. This is going to be equal to, I'm going to pull in that debit 2008.96, and so it increases in the debit direction represented by a positive number to 2008.96. The credit is going to go to equity, which is unusual for like if I was to buy inventory, but we're putting the beginning balances on the books, and therefore that's why it's going to net out into equity. Note that you might be saying, well, what if it was a sole proprietorship versus a partnership versus a company, corporation? Well, then we could still use the same method, netting it out to equity. Equity as a total will be correct. Then we can go in after this has all been entered and adjust the equity accounts to what the proper accounts should be. For a sole proprietorship, we would just have one, the capital account or equity. For a partnership, we would have two, breaking out or more, two or more for the partners, breaking out for the partners. And for a corporation, we'd have to break it out between the common stock and the retained earnings and so on. So that's going to be the idea. So the equity is then going to go over here to the equity, and there we have it there. Now we can also need to post this to the general ledger accounts. So I'm going to post it to the GL as well. So we got the third account being the inventory account. So I'm going to post this on over here, going to inventory. And so that's going to be the third account, which is down here in cell O17. I'm going to type 11 on the date. We're in cell P17. I'm going to use a formula to do this. You could hard code, meaning type it in there, but it's better to do with a formula because then you can see what is going on. I'll show you that in a second. So I'm going to say equals. I like to do this just with the arrows, left until you hit the wall, up until you hit the transaction. Last transactions, the ones we want to record in C2. You may also just memorize that you're trying to post C2 and just type in equals C2. Once you have this in place, you can see that we're out of balance up top. And if you're trying to figure out why, you can go into that cell and you can basically say, where's that coming from? And you can use these icons to kind of trace back, or you could simply double click. Those icons are in the formulas area, the formula auditing right there. I use them often, so I put a shortcut to them, right clicking on it, and then adding it to my toolbar up top. Back to the Home tab, I'm going to then remove that blue line. The other side then is going to be going to equity. That's my last account thus far. It's the blue one, so I'm going to go to the right, assets, then liabilities, and then the equity account way down here in cell AA17. I'm going to type a 1-1 in AB17. I'm going to say equals, left arrow till I hit the wall. Scrolling back up, we're going to pick up that equity 2896 and enter. So there we have our equity. If I go back to the left, then that puts us back in balance up top in the GL. And that also puts us back, ties us to what we have in the trial balance, hopefully as well. So now we also need to support this number with a subsidiary ledger telling us what kind of inventory we have. Now, to do this, you might use different methods depending on the type of inventory. You might use specific identification if you had a large piece of inventory like cars or something, or some kind of flow assumption if basically normal, like smaller units of inventory that are the same, such as, so you'd be using first in, first out, last in, first out, or weighted average. I don't want to get too into depth on the differences between them, but it's a flow assumption. The QuickBooks desktop version, for example, by default will use the weighted average. And if you have like an online version, it'll typically use the FIFO. Those are probably the two most common flow assumptions. But you can get into courses on how to calculate the flow assumptions. Here, we just want to show that you need that subsidiary ledger in general. So this will be a little bit more convoluted to construct. So this will take us a bit of time. I'm going to make this one a little bit skinnier. up top, I'm going to call this the inventory subsidiary ledger. And then I'm going to say that there's going to be 3 main categories, and each of those categories are going to have 3 columns in it. One is going to be purchases, 1, 2, 3, and the next is going to be cost of goods sold, 1, 2, 3, and then ending inventory. So there we have that. And then I'm going to label the item that we're going to be putting in place, which is coming from our items worksheet, which is this one. So we're going to be labeling these items. So I'm going to say this first one is an ELP. So I'm just going to call that here an ELP. So there we have that. And then each one of these 3 components are going to have 3 parts, which is units that we're going to have of that guitar. And then we're going to have the unit cost. And then we're going to have the total cost. And I'm going to copy that across, same headers, to the cost of goods sold and to the ending inventory. So this is what we have on the outline. So I'm going to say, all right, so then up top, I'm going to make this black and white because that's basically our header. Font group, making it black and white. And then down here, I'm going to choose these 3 so I can center it across the top there. Going to right click and I'm going to use the format cells, and I'd like to center it across, which is going to be this one. And so we'll say okay. And then I'm going to make that green and green. So I'm going to hit the bucket up top. We're going to make that the dark green, and then this one with the light green. And then I'll do the same thing here, formatting these 3, right click on this. I'm going to right click on this one, and we're going to format those cells, and we'll say alignment. Let's center that across. Okay. Right click on it, or let's do it this way, drop down up top, making that the dark yellow and then the orange on top. And then same thing here. Let's try doing it this way. I'm going to select these 3, paintbrush it, paintbrush on down, but then change the color. This one's that dark blue with the light blue on top of it. Okay, and then on this one, I'm also going to make this that green, green and green. So let's make this one the green and the green. And then these I'm going to, well, I did that backwards, didn't I? Dark green and then the light green. And then all these I'm going to make black and white by going to the font group. We'll make this one black and white, and then alignment and center it. So I know that was a lot of tedious kind of work there, but we're going to put under here, this is going to be the date. This is going to be the date. And then let's make that one black and white as well. Black and white. All right, I want to format the date in the same format as the date form over here, like a 1-1 format. So to do that, I'm going to then say home tab, paintbrush, and I'm going to paintbrush it down to like those 12 items in a similar fashion as we had on the left. So now I've got the date that looks like it's formatted correctly. I could probably make this date field a little bit smaller maybe. So there we have it. And then I'm going to start off with the beginning balance in a similar fashion as we have seen with our GL information. Okay, so then I'm going to make this whole thing blue and bordered. So let's make this whole thing blue and bordered, font group, and make the borders on it and make it that blue right there we've been looking at. Same kind of blue color. So that looks good. And then finally, we're going to say how many units do we have of this thing. They cost 400 and we have one, I think one of that item. So I'm going to say, all right, 401. So at the ending balance, units 400. We've got one of them. Total cost is going to equal 400 times 1. Whew, that was a lot. All right. But now we could just copy this down. We can copy this format down for the rest of them. We're going to have to do the same thing now for the rest of these inventory items, but we could copy and paste them down. So I'm going to go back on over and let's just copy it down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this whole thing now. Can I now I'll keep it the way it is. Take this whole thing. I'm just going to Control C and I'm going to paste it on down here. And let's just do, how many units do we have? We've got to do this for, let's do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I'm going to go back on over, and I'm just going to do 2, just like we did with the GL. So I'm not going to go down anymore. I'm going to go to the right. So I'm going to paste that again. This time, let's take from the skinny column, from the skinny. What's the skinny? I don't know what it is because it's hidden, but there's the skinny. On over to the AN and copy that, paste it there. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we'll paste it again right here on the AZ. And so there we have the six items. And now we can just go in and adjust the amounts and the names. So the first one's an ELP, and the next one's going to be an EPSP, standing for an Epiphone Standard Pro, EPSP. So I'm going to call this an EPSP. And that one, let's see how much that one costs and how many we have. What did that one cost? That one was 480, and we have one of them. 480 and 1. All right, we got 480 on the unit cost starting point and 1. Okay, what's the next one we got? The next one we have on hand happens to be an EPR, Epiphone Riviera. EPR, okay. So it's going to be an EPR. And that one then, how much does it cost? An EPR, 440. And we have one of them, 440. We got one. So 440 and 1. 440 and 1. And then the next one is going to be, what's the next one? The next one's an EPSH, standing for an Epiphone Semi-Hollow Body, EPSH. Okay, EPSH down here, right there, EPSH. And what's the cost of that thing? How much does one of those cost? These are not accurate prices. I have no idea, but it's going to be $320, and we've got 2 of them, $320 and 2. So we're going to say, all right, $320 and 2 of them. Okay. And then we're going to go to the next one. Almost there. The next one that we have is a bit cheaper. It's a Gibson, a GIUSA. GIUSA. So we're going to say, all right, it's a GIUSA. And so that one then is going to be, how much does that one cost us? It's going to cost $304. Notice I'm not taking the sales price. We're going to sell it for that amount, but I'm just picking up the cost, $304, and we got 3 of those ones. We got 3 of those. $304 and 3 of them. And then finally, one more. We got one more thing, which is, I think it's just a ukulele. We also have a ukulele. So it's a diamond head ukulele, a duck. It's a duck. All right, so we got the good old duck. And then it's going to be the cost of those things cost $24, and we've got one of them, 24 and 1. Okay, 24 and 1. So we're going to say $24, and we got one of them. Okay, so then we got to do our check figure up top. So now we've got our different units, and we got to do our running. We need to do the running balance, similar kind of concept we saw in the past. I'd like this running balance to go to the bottom, so when I get my check figure, it's pulling from the bottom here. So I'm going to say I'm just going to say this equals the one above it, and I'm just going to copy that all the way down and run that balance to the bottom. Run it to the bottom. And then we'll adjust it as we make sales and whatnot. So I'm going to say this equals the one above it, and then run it to the bottom. So let's do that across the board. Here's the board, and we're going across it. We're going across the board with this same technique of equals the one above, and then run it down to the bottom. Now wait a second. This one should be 2. The units, and I've got the units and the unit cost backwards, don't I? Oh, okay, let me see if I can fix that. The unit should be 1 and 400, and this one should be unit 1 and 480, and this one should be 1 and 440, And this one should be, I think, 2 and 320. And then this one should be 3 and 304. And this one should be 1 and 24. All right, let's see if that works. We'll check it out, so we're double checking it. Obviously, those errors were made purposely so we can do our double checking figure and figure it out. It's part of the process, people. It's part of the process. So we're doing this across the board. This is like a checkerboard, and we're sweeping the checkerboard across the board with this technique. Up top, running it down. Okay, so now we got our check figure. Let's see if we did it right. Over here, did I get something right? Let's see. So I'm going to delete that, and I'm going to say this equals the n number on all these, and it should come out to that 2,896 that we saw here, 2,896. So let's see if that's the case. This one plus the end here plus the last one here plus the last one here. I feel like I'm missing something. I am missing something. Hold on. I don't want to do, I need to take this back. I need to take this back on over here, way over here. It's the wrong cell. I'm in cell AE1. Let's try it again. Do it again. Do it right this time. Do it right. You're confusing people. Okay. So we got 400 and then 480 plus, and then we're going to go to the right. We're going to pick up the 440 plus the 640 plus, go to the right, and we're going to pick up the 912 plus the 24 and enter the truth moment. There it is, moment of the truthness. If I was to say where do these come from, they're right there. You could see with the tools we were looking at. So they're coming from the ending balances, and that adds up to that 2896, which I believe is correct. So now we would like to kind of check that off. I would like to check figure tying it out to what is on the trial balance. What I'm going to do is say this equals this number minus the trial balance, which I'm going to go all the way to the left to pick up. And I'm going to say minus this number, and it should be 0. Subtracting those two out should be 0. That's our check figure. I want to apply my same kind of rules for the check figure. So I'm going to do the conditional formatting here again. So I'm going to remove these things. I'm going to go to the home page, conditional formatting, and say if it's greater than 1, make it red. So if it's 2, turns red. And then I'm going to say conditional formatting. If it's less than 1, make it red. So if it's -2, turns red. And then finally, if it's between -1 and 1, then we want it to turn green. So there we have our conditional formatting. And so then I'm going to call this right here the inventory subsidiary ledger. And let's make this whole thing black and white all the way across. Say this whole thing needs to be black and white. That whole thing needs to be black and white. And then I'm going to say the same. I'm just going to say this equals that one over here. So I have the same thing. And then this whole thing needs to be black and white again. Let's just make it black and white across. Black and white. And then this one. Also, I'm just going to say this equals the one before it. So if I misspell, that's less likely to misspell, or so maybe, I don't know. Whatever. Black and white. So there we have it. So now we got the subledge that's going to tie out. I know that was tedious, and I made, so let's spell check it. Did I spell everything right? Bow. I'm going to ignore that. Everything seems to be spelled. They say it's spelled right. It's good enough for me. So this adds up to the 2896, which I think everything's appropriate. Let's make it a little smaller. Not that small. What in the world? Let's make this like a little smaller is all I wanted. Okay, so I think this ties out. Everything looks correct, right? Right? It ties out to this, and it ties out to this. Okay, so then as we enter data going forward, we're going to have to say the purchases will be in this column and adjust the ending balances, and then the cost of goods sold we'll put here in the ending balance. We'll see how that kind of works once we start entering data. But the point here is we've got the supporting subsidiary ledger, that being important if you're tracking the inventory on a perpetual basis. If I go all the way back to the left, then you can see that ties out to the 2896 here, and it looks good.